There is a place more dangerous than open rebellion. It is not loud. It is not obvious. It does not look like sin on the surface. It looks almost right. It looks like someone who attends, someone who listens, someone who agrees, someone who would say, without hesitation, I know God, and yet.
Jesus never warned that many would reject him. He warned that many would believe they belonged to him when they did not. That should unsettle you, because it means the greatest danger is not being far from God. The greatest danger is being close enough to believe you are safe. There is a place more dangerous than open rebellion. It is not the place of the atheist. It is not the place of the mocker. It is not the place of the one who openly rejects God. It is the place of the person who believes they are right with him, but are not. Jesus did not spend most of his warnings on those who hated him. He warned those who thought they knew him. The most sobering truth you may ever hear is this: you can be close to the truth and still miss it completely. There is a category of people that is rarely talked about. Not the lost in the obvious sense, not the openly sinful, not the ones running in the opposite direction, but those who are close. They hear the word. They recognize truth when they hear it. They may even feel conviction when it is spoken. They are not indifferent. They are not hostile. They are almost, and that is what makes it so dangerous, because almost feels safe. It feels like progress. It feels like movement. It feels like you are on the right path. But spiritually, almost is not a category that exists. There is no such thing as being partially surrendered. There is no such thing as halfway obedience. There is no such thing as standing near the narrow gate and being counted as one who has entered it. Jesus said in Matthew 7 verses 21 through 23 that not everyone who says, Lord, Lord, will enter the kingdom of heaven. That alone should stop us, because he is not describing strangers. He is describing people who speak his name, people who believe they belong to him, people who are confident in their position. They say, Lord, Lord. That is not casual language. That is familiarity. That is recognition. That is belief. And yet he says, I never knew you. Not, you wandered away. Not, you were once mine. I never knew you. That means proximity is not relationship. That means exposure is not transformation. That means knowing about him is not the same as knowing him. This is where many people quietly settle. They learn truth, but do not live it. They feel conviction, but do not respond to it. They agree with the word, but do not obey it. And over time, something dangerous happens. Familiarity replaces surrender. They begin to believe that because they are close, they are secure. But closeness has never saved anyone. There are people who have sat in church for years and have never surrendered their life to Christ. There are people who know Scripture but have never submitted to it. There are people who can explain truth but have never been changed by it. And the longer someone remains in that place, the more normal it begins to feel. The more they assume they are fine, because nothing outward looks wrong. They are not rejecting God. They are just not yielding to him. And that difference is everything. The narrow gate is not missed because it is hidden. It is missed because it is narrow. It requires something that almost will never give. It requires surrender. Jesus said in Luke 9 verse 23 that anyone who would follow him must deny themselves, take up their cross daily, and follow him. That is not partial. That is not occasional. That is not when it is convenient. That is daily surrender. And this is where almost begins to break down. Because almost will agree with that verse. Almost will even admire that verse. But almost will not live it. Almost will say, that is true, and then continue holding on to control. Holding on to plans. Holding on to identity. Holding on to self. And as long as self remains on the throne, Christ is not. You cannot have two masters. You cannot hold on and surrender at the same time. You cannot follow Christ while still leading your own life. At some point, There must be a line that is crossed, not emotionally, not intellectually, but actually. This is where the message becomes personal, because it is easy to hear this and think of someone else. It is easy to assume this applies to those who are less committed, less informed, less serious. But the people Jesus warned most strongly were often the most religious, the most engaged, the most confident. So the question is not what we claim. The question is not what we know. The question is not what we feel. The question is this: have we surrendered? Not partially, not occasionally, but fully. Do we obey, or do we just agree? Do we follow, or do we just admire? Have we given him control, or have we simply invited him to observe our lives? Because there is a difference, and that difference determines everything. This is not about perfection. This is about direction. A surrendered life will still struggle. A surrendered life will still fail at times. But a surrendered life does not resist God's authority. It yields to it. It responds. It changes. It moves. Almost does not. Almost delays. Almost hesitates. Almost says not yet, and that is where many remain. Not because they reject truth, but because they postpone surrender. They say, I will deal with that later. I will change that eventually. I know what I need to do, just not right now. But delayed obedience is still disobedience. And time does not make that safer. It makes it more dangerous. Because the longer you delay, the more comfortable you become staying where you are. The more your heart adjusts, the more conviction softens, until what once felt urgent begins to feel optional. And that is how people remain near the gate, without ever entering it. They stand close enough to see it, close enough to understand it, close enough to talk about it, but never step through. And the tragedy is not that they were far away. The tragedy is that they were so close, and still outside. There is a moment where faith becomes real, not when you understand more, not when you feel more, but when you surrender, when you release control, when obedience becomes something you do, not something you admire. That moment is costly, because it means something has to die. Your will, your control, your version of the plan. That is why the gate is narrow, not because it is hidden, but because few are willing to lay those things down. And that is the dividing line, not knowledge, not emotion, not intention. Surrender, and without it, there is no entrance. You can be sincere and still be wrong. You can be close and still be outside. You can believe you are safe and still be lost. That is why this matters. This is not about being more committed. This is about whether we have actually entered. Because in the end, there are not categories like we create. There are not degrees of saved. There are not levels of almost. There are those who have entered and those who have not. And the difference is not proximity. It is surrender. The narrow gate is not hidden. It is simply not entered by accident. No one drifts into it. No one stumbles through it. It is entered on purpose, through surrender, through obedience, through a decision that costs something. And that is where many stop, not because they cannot go further, but because they will not. They remain where it is comfortable, where it is familiar, where it feels safe. And they call that faith. But faith that costs nothing has never been the faith Jesus described. So the question is not whether you are near the gate. The question is not whether you can see it. The question is not whether you understand it. The question is this: have you entered? Because standing near will not save you. Understanding it will not save you. Agreeing with it will not save you. Only surrender opens the way. The narrow gate is not crowded, not because it is hidden, but because surrender is a price most people will not pay. And the tragedy is not that people reject it. The tragedy is that many stand near it, believing they have already passed through, almost saved is still lost.
If you like this content, then kindly hit like, subscribe, and share.